How did we get to the point in society where we consider words to actually be violence? This is Dispatches from the Culture War. I'm MD Perkins. Today I wanted to read you an article I recently wrote about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The impetus for this article was not just the assassination itself, but a lot of the justifications that I began to see online of people finding ways to claim that somehow Charlie brought this on himself. This is what you get for the kind of things that you say, that essentially operating with the principle that words are violence. Now, I don't believe that words are violence, and I believe we all instinctively understand that words aren't violence, but we've undertaken, somehow in society, we've kind of gotten to the point where there are these justifications that Charlie brought this on himself because of his rhetoric, the things that he said, and therefore that in some way justifies the murderous action that was undertaken against him. And so this article was published in American Family News on September 17th, 2025. The title of the article is Free Speech, Double Standards, and the Assassination of Charlie Kirk. I originally published it, or I sent it to the editors with the main title of Why Words Aren't Violence. They decided not to use that one, but I will mention that to you because I like that title, Why Words Aren't Violence. So this was written by MD Perkins and published September 17th, 2025. Free Speech, Double Standards, and the Assassination of Charlie Kirk. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Most of us grew up with that well-known rhyme. We knew it wasn't fully true, words did hurt, but we also knew insults and name-calling didn't hurt the same as a broken arm or a rock to the forehead. The rhyme wasn't so much about how words didn't matter, but a reminder of resilience, a mantra you told yourself to stay strong in the face of the school bully. At the core, it was a way of saying, I can choose how much power words will have over me. My kids have never heard that rhyme. I must assume that's because it doesn't represent the spirit of our age. We now live in a society where many believe that words are violence. And tragically, it seems that belief may help pave the way for real violence, like the brutal assassination of conservative commentator and Christian activist Charlie Kirk. In an age of safe spaces, performative outrage, and labeling a sitting U.S. president, quote, literally Hitler, end quote, it is easy to recognize that free speech has become contested ground. But the real question is why? How did words become violence? Justifications for murder. When reports and video from Utah Valley University began to circulate on the afternoon of September 10th, 2025, most of us watched in horror and sadness. Waiting for updates, unsure of how factual each new piece of hearsay might be, reputable news couldn't come fast enough. Sadly, within moments of the announcement that Kirk had indeed been killed, the phrase, "he's dead," began to trend on X. The vile messages showed gifs and images of celebration, all marked by that simple message, gloating at the death of a husband, father, and patriot. What would generate such a loathsome response from supposedly intelligent, civilized, and, it's claimed, supremely empathic people? According to them, Charlie Kirk was a fascist, a Nazi, a white supremacist, and a Christian nationalist. In a piece in The Nation titled Charlie Kirk's Legacy Deserves No Mourning, Kirk is presented not as a promoter of free speech and civil discourse, but rather as, quote, a white Christian nationalist provocateur, end quote, who, quote, preached hate, bigotry, and division, end quote. A few choice quotes were offered to land that verdict. These toxic labels stand as de facto critiques of Kirk's conservative Christian views. However, there is no content to these labels. They are incendiary insults, eliciting emotional reactions both pro and con. But more troubling, in light of Kirk's assassination, it is being revealed that these labels are actually subtle inferences that his murder was justified. As historian Victor Davis Hanson has recently observed, among the left, quote, there is a contextualization, a normalization for the use of violence as a political means, end quote. This sentiment was evident in the now infamous on-air comments from MSNBC analyst Matthew Dowd, who was later fired. Dowd stated that Kirk was constantly sort of pushing the sort of hate speech aimed at certain groups, and concluded by saying, hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which lead to hateful actions. That was Dowd's quote. Though hedged with sort of, the implication was clear. Kirk's views were dangerous and inherently violent. Dowd's logic invites two interpretations, both of them troubling. One is that Kirk's hate speech incited others to harm those he allegedly targeted. The other, more fitting in light of his actual murder, is that Kirk's speech provoked a violent retaliation. In either case, the cause and effect logic serves to contextualize the violence, casting it not as an atrocity, but as an unfortunate inevitability, just part of the environment that we're in. That was actually a quote from Dowd, the environment that we're in. Why should we mourn when the man brought it on himself? Words as violence and assassination culture. The issue is deeper than the way many on the left have reacted to the murder of Charlie Kirk. In October 2024, a national survey by the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE being the acronym, found that 4 in 5 Americans, 80%, agreed to some extent with the statement, words can be violence. While all groups are represented in that sample, there were 3 groups most likely to agree with that sentiment: women, Gen Z, and Democrats. What is noteworthy is at a time when actual violent crime is decreasing, our cultural understanding of violence is paradoxically expanding. Speech that wounds a person's feelings is being seen increasingly as the equivalent of actions that harm a person's body. Once speech is labeled as violence, it naturally follows that physical violence becomes a justifiable response to disliked speech. This is surely why the justification of political violence has also been increasing recently. In another recent survey, Rutgers University's Network Contagion Research Institute, NCRI, identified a rise in what they labeled assassination culture. The study found that over half of respondents, that's 56%, who identified as politically left of center, stated that the murder of President Trump would at least be somewhat justified. Even more chilling was that 14.1% said it would be completely justified. The same survey found that 10.7% of respondents said the same thing of the murder of Elon Musk. The double standard. These aren't just fringe opinions. They reveal a trend where violence is increasingly seen as a morally appropriate response to disliked speech or people. Statements and viewpoints themselves become acts of violence in this way, but only, it seems, for those of a certain political class. Labeling Charlie Kirk as a bigot, for example, is not seen as hate speech in the way that labeling a gay man a sinner would be seen as that. It doesn't matter that Charlie Kirk, along with any Bible-believing Christian, would label all mankind, himself included, as a sinner. The problem is that Kirk doesn't affirm homosexuality as good. The formula in the leftist paradigm is simple. To not affirm someone's sexual identity is a denial of one's personhood. To deny one's personhood is to deny someone's existence. Therefore, to deny someone's existence is equal to an act of violence. This is why LGBTQ activists frequently speak about erasure, This is why LGBTQ activists frequently speak about erasure, tying the denial of gay or trans identity to a denial of the personhood of gay or trans individuals. It creates an inevitable category where a conservative critic of LGBTQ doesn't merely hold an opinion, but is actually espousing hateful, violent rhetoric. There is no room for differing views at this table because the conservative view is, by the new definition, hateful and violent. This is how an associate professor at the University of Michigan can justify Kirk's murder by saying, quote, "Even if you believe violence isn't the answer, it is a solution, especially to the violent conditions and violent rhetoric spewed by empowered people that create them," end quote. Additionally, the left has at times insisted that, Additionally, the left has at times insisted that silence is violence. What is meant is not that society is hindered when open discourse is hindered, but rather that those who agree with progressive causes have a duty to speak out in support. This further narrows the already shrinking range of acceptable discourse. The prevailing narrative needs your support. Meanwhile, those who dissent, hesitate, or remain silent are now tantamount to violent oppressors. It encourages rash reactions and thoughtless hot takes by people who agree with leftist sentiments, which in turn invites the same from the right. It is emotional manipulation designed to elevate It is emotional manipulation designed to elevate agreeable speech and to denigrate anything that counters it. Honest dialogue disappears entirely as the narrative feeds an echo chamber. The value of persuasion. If words are violence and disagreement is hate, then there is no longer any room for persuasion. This is the challenge of free speech. Two parties with differing viewpoints can hash things out, presenting facts and perspectives and enriching themselves and others through the exchange. But when feelings become truth, that exchange is no longer a dialogue. It's considered harm and therefore dangerous. The deeper reason words are seen as violence is because they carry a weight that feelings cannot, an objective connection to truth. The redefinition of language is a redefinition of reality. We cannot fully escape the edges of actual reality crashing against our perceptions, though we try. And when truth is replaced by emotion, the ability for meaningful discourse disappears. Maybe it's time to reclaim the resilience behind the old adage, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." Speech has power to build up or tear down, it's true. But words are not the same as actions. A word spoken in anger, though liable to God's judgment, says Matthew 5, verses 21 through 23, is not equivalent to a violent act. To conflate the two makes society unworkable and unsafe. Words give voice to ideas, revealing the heart and mind of the speaker. Listening forces us beyond ourselves, challenging our assumptions and sharpening our view of reality. In an age dominated by imagery and emotion, reclaiming reasoned discourse is more essential than ever. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn warned, quote, "Violence can only be concealed by a lie, and the lie can only be maintained by violence," end quote. If we allow lies about speech, truth, and harm to govern our culture, real violence will not just be excused, it will be inevitable. So I wrote that in the wake of all of the assassination talk and the different discussions that were happening online. I felt like it was important to speak to this issue of words as violence because that seemed to undergird a lot of the reaction and response that was out there. How did it come to be this way? Why are we thinking like this? Well, I think something has to do with a concept known as expressive individualism. Basically, individuals have to express their innermost desires, and that's how you fulfill your life. That's what true meaning and purpose is to be able to define your desires, express those things both in speech and in living. But that when you have a world full of expressive individuals, you're always going to have a world that in some ways is going to be conflicted because everyone is going to have a different view about what meaning and purpose is, what truth is, and what error is, and what's good and what's bad. You don't have some sort of collective standard or sense of what is true and what is false, what is good and what is bad. And to see, I mean, we're created in God's image, right? And part of what that means is that we have a conscience, we have the ability to reason, and we have the ability to communicate. We have the ability to express inner thoughts and desires. And the conduit we have to do that is language. And so to take language and to essentially weaponize it for a certain group of people within a certain political sphere, within certain religious values, is to essentially cut off those people from participating in the larger issues of public life. And so that's part of what's happening here with this whole words are violence thing and the blaming of Charlie Kirk for his own murder. The claim that he brought it on himself because he had certain views that weren't acceptable to other people. And I think that's something that we should be careful about, that we should be observant of, that we should be paying attention to these shifts that are happening in society, that even come down to how we treat language. So if you want to read that article or share the article, there's a link in the description. But thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope that this was helpful and clarifying in some way.